Excellent. Here we go for another week of the Sunshine State Happy Hour. This is probably going to be the last week where we go all 5 days a week. I think things are starting to return to normal just a little bit, so we may be dropping back to just 1 day a week, and that day is probably going to be Thursday. So if you're watching this live or you're within a day of our broadcast on YouTube, head to our Twitter handle at Florida Beer Blog and vote to tell us which day you would like. Thursday is in the lead, so it's looking like Thursday is going to be what it is. All right, so back in 1897, the first craft brewery in the state of Florida opened. It was called the Florida Brewery, and it sat in the middle of Ybor City. The building is still there, but the brewery is long gone, and the name has sort of bounced around a little bit. And since the 80s, it has actually settled in Auburndale with a brewery that is very massive. And even if you don't know the name of the Florida Brewery now, you really probably know a good number of their products. Something that I was amazed by. So we are here with Stacey Oakley from the Florida Brewery, all the way in Auburndale, Florida. Stacey, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course. Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Well, cheers to you too. And I was going to say, what awesome beverage. Obviously, we've got a couple 6-packs in the background. I'm assuming you didn't just crack one of those open before the show started to drink. What are you consuming right now?
No, so today I'm tasting we're working on a lemon shandy to add to our Beach Me Up beverage line, Beach Me Up shandy line. So right behind me I have Beach Me Up grapefruit shandy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the other side is our Gator Lager, but the Beach Me Up, surprisingly, is one of our number one beers in our tap room. So we're adding to that line. We have a pina colada coming out and a lemon coming out.
That's amazing. And obviously, you've got those couple packages, the Gator and everything else, and we've seen those. We'll chat about those in a little bit. But your tap room has quite a number of taps that will obviously never make it out of Auburndale. With the Beach Me Up line, is that something else that you're looking at packaging, or?
We are thinking we will eventually do like a Beach Me Up beach box. So there will be like a variety pack, almost like the seltzers are, but instead it will still be beer.
Excellent. So like you were talking about before the show started, the Florida Brewery has been around since the 80s. And it seems like the number one beer product, we'll talk about that implication a little bit later, but the number one beer product that you have right now is actually a Venezuelan recipe called Polar. Is that correct?
Correct. It is. We brew and produce Polar for our parent company out of Venezuela, and they asked us to start producing it back in 2013, when the government in Venezuela was really struggling to get product exported. So in order to keep the brand alive, they came to us, and that's when really it all started happening. So we expanded our brew house at that point in time, expanded a lot of our machinery and packaging line, and started producing significant amounts of Polar for both domestic and international.
Interesting. And that's pretty well statewide distribution, or do you actually get it outside of Florida?
It does go outside of Florida. Within the U.S. So we go to D.C. area. It's usually heavily populated areas that have a lot of the Venezuelan population that's moved there. So New York City joined on last year. In Queens, there's like a huge pocket there. So we distribute up there and to D.C. and to Texas.
Interesting. But none of it goes to Venezuela itself, correct?
None of it goes to Venezuela. Their production is currently shut down. So there's been talks about that in order to get product back to them. But it is also very difficult to get items into the country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's interesting to look at the geopolitical ramifications of beer right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, but obviously there's enough of a market here in the U.S. and obviously here in Florida for Polar, but that's not the only beer that you make, as you sort of mentioned. Right. What kind of packages do you have, and where can people generally go to find those 6-packs that you have out in the market, and then this Beach Me Up that you'll be releasing soon?
Sure. So we definitely have 2 different markets going on with our brands. We're distributed through the AB House, but We're in the premium import category with Polar, even though it's made here. And that is usually typically found in all of your Latin American grocery stores, in the Bravos, Sedanos, Presidentes. We are heavily distributed through Total Wines in both 6-packs and 12-packs, primarily bottles. But we do produce 7-ounce bottles and 8-ounce cans. And
interesting.
That's a mini package, basically, but it is the most popular package in Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire because of tax implications. Not only
interesting,
that, but the smaller size, because of the heat and the weather, the beer stays cold until the last drop. So the little minis are actually preferred on the beaches of Aruba and Curacao.
So you have a special packaging just for those markets?
We do, but it has moved its way to, we have offered it now to our distributors here. And surprisingly, Miami does pick up a lot of the small size. So mainly because of the beaches.
Yeah, interesting. I had seen some of the 8-ounce stubby cans, but I didn't realize that there were 7-ounce bottles as well that were sort of out there. Is it the kind of stub nose, kind of like
it's a long neck. I wish I had one. I usually have all of them with me, but it's actually a long neck. So it's really little. I mean, and it's kind of funny looking, but it does have a long neck. And then actually our 8-ounce can is a slim or sleek can.
Oh, kind of like
it's like the 12-ounce sleeks that all of the hard seltzers are in, but shorter because it's
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it does well.
Okay, so now obviously these beers are all relatively new. Well, I mean, obviously Polar is not, but the other beers that you have that you produce for domestic consumption are relatively new.
Yep.
But the Florida Brewery's been around for several decades now. What has been coming out of the Florida Brewery that's kept you all afloat, but even though you're kind of maintained a low profile?
So it is crazy. We are the second oldest brewery still in operation in Florida that most people have never heard about. So starting back in the 80s, the brewery was actually chosen to be a craft brewery by a family called the Duncans. So actually they started it back in the 70s. They chose Auburndale because of the quality of the water.
Okay.
And the community support at the time. So a brewmaster came down from Ohio and he settled into Auburndale and built the Duncan Brewery. Now they were way ahead of their time because they started doing craft before craft was even an option. And they also did a bunch of beers for a lot of the grocery stores. So they did private label beers for like Winn-Dixie and Albertsons. They did Master's Choice and Fisher's and Fisherman's and bunch of non-national beers, but beers that were local and regional to the grocery stores here. And then actually the son of the brewer went, he was a Gator, and he in college decided that they wanted to make Gator lager.
Okay.
So we actually, it's funny, I'll get this for you. So Alligator Light.
Oh, wow.
This was produced by the Florida Brewery back in early 80s. Nice. And as you can see, it has the blue and orange label. Now our guess, because we don't know factually what happened, but Alligator Light turned into Gator Lager.
Okay. That's the green can,
yeah. Green can. So it changed colors and changed name. And I believe it has something to do with the university because there was some cease and desist when we produced Gator Lager. And we had to fight that it was not the same colors. It had nothing to do with the university and all of that. We are okay with that now, but
okay, good.
They changed Alligator beer and Alligator Light to Gator in 1987.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting because there's a long history back then of the craft beers that they used to produce. But none of them really made it that far. Some of them did. Gator Lager did travel up to Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
And they would sell along the route, basically, all the way up there. So we still get people saying, hey, we remember this beer. How do we get it? And it's not the same beer. We don't have the same formula, but it is the same name. We did reach out to the original family, but they didn't have the original formula either. So
I was going to ask, because if you have all these historic beers, especially in terms of Florida history, craft beer has sort of made a big 180 to the point where there would probably be a market to revisit a lot of those beers. Obviously, with the original Alligator Lager, Alligator Light, it's not there. But do you have, or does anybody at the brewery have a good beat on the other old recipes and maybe take a crack at putting them through the system again just to see what would happen?
we wish we did, and we've tried and we've reached out, but I don't know if there was just not great record keeping back then, and obviously most of it was pen and paper. So all we've been able to find is, obviously we've talked to the family, but now it's the grandsons of the original brewer.
Gotcha.
And articles, and most of it's just names and no formulas.
That's a shame. But one thing that you have the recipes for very well, and I was sort of blown away to know that you make this and you make so much of it, is Malta.
Yes.
Which is, if you are familiar with the Hispanic community, you know what Malta is. If you don't really understand a whole lot of it, you've probably been hearing this word for the first time. And I think I know what Malta is, but could you give us a good rundown, please?
Sure. So we are one of the few that still authentically brew Malta. And when I say that, it doesn't come from a concentrate or anything like that. All of the Maltas that we produce here. So the reason why Malta was started is at the brewery is because it shares a lot of the same characteristics as brewing beer, but then there's added ingredients, but it takes a lot less time to make. So whereas beer has maturation time and all of that because of the alcohol, Malta is a 3-day process. Okay. So all of our barley, and what helps us is the volume of Malta that we do helps us a lot with our cost of our barley. So we get rail cars in from Canada of 2-row spring barley, and that's used in all of our Malta. And then you have we do have ready hops in Malta, water, and then there's a lot of added sugar and caramel coloring. So it's definitely not a diet drink by any means.
Gotcha.
But it's equivalent to a Hispanic soda of sorts. That's what some communities, it's a nutritional drink. Some communities, it's a morning drink with your, cereal. And then others, it's considered almost like a meal replacement drink.
And for so long, I always figured that Malta was just wort. Like, you go through the first couple steps of the brewing process, and right before you get to where you pitch the yeast, you just stop and put it in a bottle. But this is apparently not the case.
Nope. It's definitely got some added ingredients in there. And we, depending on the different Maltas, so we have different recipes for all of the brands that we do. And like I told you earlier, we do pretty much all of the Maltas on the shelf of Publix. We do Publix private label. We do Goya. We do Bacardi. We do Polar Maltine. We do a generic brand. So all of those do have different formulas. They're slightly different. Some use real cane sugar like Maltine, and then others will use high fructose corn syrup. So it does differentiate flavor based on what we're using. And some of them have different malts in it besides the 2-row spring barley.
Interesting. And is there any way that you have your brewers try to maybe create a batch of Malta, then maybe set a little bit aside, pitch some yeast and see how it turns out? Or is that Malta really just not for that?
It's really not for that because of the amount of sugar. We've thought about it and we've attempted it, and we've always said, there's got to be something Malta could be mixed with that would make it taste like a fantastic adult beverage. We haven't found that yet. So challenge to your viewers.
Okay.
You guys can go out, find some Malta on the shelf, and then make a fantastic drink out of it. Let us know. One thing we do use it for is we have a small a restaurant, a brew pub downtown Auburndale. And they'll use the Malta to braise like short ribs in and things like that because it is a great braising liquid.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And yeah, so you've got the brewery and you've got the kind of brew pub downtown. Obviously, things have been a little slow over the past couple of months due to the coronavirus, but especially for the beer, especially the Polar, and then especially with the Malta, was there any sort of a noticeable change in the business model since so much of your package is meant to be purchased outside of the brewery? Or do you still see something noticeable because you have visitors that come in?
So it's interesting because as a brewery and people who are really passionate about beer, we always kind of curse Malta. Just because it's really not fun. And when you have to do a tasting of it all the time, you're like, okay, can we please just taste some beer in the morning instead? But we were thankful for it during COVID because Malta became a staple in a lot of people's homes as far as groceries go. And so we saw actually a pretty large, significant increase in Malta.
Interesting.
And a pretty large decrease in beer. Mainly because a lot of our beer does go to the Caribbean islands for tourism. So with tourism being completely down, Aruba and Curacao, no tourists are visiting there right now. The 30,000 cases that we were producing a month for those islands went to 10,000 cases, 8,000 cases. So we were grateful for Malta. In addition, our craft pretty much completely stopped. We were supposed to be launching in Key West in April and in Orlando in April. So our distributors got their first loads right before COVID. And unfortunately, obviously, all of that's being returned. And we'll try to relaunch when they both get back open.
Gotcha.
But craft definitely, I mean, unfortunately, everybody got hit really hard that was strictly in the craft arena. And we were grateful for our Malta during that time.
Yeah. Now I was going to say, what did you do in terms of the tap room and the brew house, the brew pub in downtown Auburndale? Were those completely shuttered for the time, or were you able to do some sort of to-go packaging product?
The brew pub has been closed. We actually have been remodeling that. So we took that time to kind of do remodeling because we did have issues back in December with a fire. So it actually was good timing for us on that. With the to-go, we did do crawlers to go for all of our customers right from the brewery. We had a rented mobile kitchen that our kitchen staff cooked out of in the front of the brewery. It was a little tough because I feel like people come for the experience of social. Like craft is so social to me, and it's an experience. And so coming to just get your crowler to go home isn't as social. But we tried different things. Like we would do, we got generic cans that we could write beers on and do 6-packs of, so people could go home and do like a date night tasting. And those things went over really well because it gave people something to do. And then if they sent in their tasting notes to us, we'd give them a free crowler of their favorite beer the next week. So we tried to engage with them in a social distance kind of way.
Well, it's interesting that you mention things like that and that you do things like that, because from the people that I've spoken to and from my own visit to Auburndale, it seems like it's a very Polar, Budweiser,
County.
Exactly. Well, yeah, the entire county. Let's just be perfectly honest about Polk County. But it seems like you have enough of a following and enough people in the surrounding community that enjoy who you are and what you did, that they were able to keep coming back and, putting a little bit of money in the coffers.
Exactly. I mean, our community, the reason why we opened the tap room was really not as a major revenue stream for us. It was an opportunity to connect with our community. I lived up on Nantucket for 7 years, and the brewery was a place to go every weekend. It's where the community all went to visit each other and hang out. And so being here, we wanted the same thing, and Auburndale doesn't have a whole lot of that. So it really became this inclusive place where no matter what anybody wanted, we would have something available for them. So we do cater to our customers with our beers. We tend to stick to lagers. And so that it is a familiar thing. And we have an 863 light that's an American light lager for those who are just transitioning into craft. And then we do get up to, we have an IPL. So we do have something for the hoppy people. We brew a stout, but most of our beers tend to be on the lighter side.
Perfect. And it's easy to approach. And like you said, it's definitely good for those people that are just starting to wade in, which I'm assuming your staff sees on a fairly regular basis.
Exactly.
Awesome. That is amazing to hear. I do have an interesting question for you because, like you said, you do produce a wide variety of malts for a lot of different companies. And then you also do a lot of contract brewing for people, not just here in Florida, but for other states.
Yep.
When people take the tour, how easily are you able to hide some of those packages so people don't know what's exactly being produced?
Well, once we have an agreement with the breweries, then that we're co-packing for, most of them are okay with us showing that we actually contract brew for them. We do obviously ask. It is difficult depending on the materials that is used in those beers, especially when the cans, if we do go to the warehouse or something like that. Plus, who knows, depending on what day it is, what we're packaging on the packaging line. Yeah. So usually people do know what we contract package or brew, and the breweries are usually pretty comfortable with it.
That's what I figured. Awesome. So, yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I actually learned a lot. There's a lot of great stuff, and I really do need to get back to Auburndale. But I will leave you with one question that I've been sort of talking to everybody about and kind of getting their feel. Obviously, during the quarantine, breweries have had to kind of think a little bit outside the box and make some changes and do some things that they normally wouldn't be doing or normally wouldn't be able to do. Once everything is back up to normal, once the tap room is full, once your brewers are making all sorts of good beer on top of the Malta that they pretty much have to make because it's so much of what you do, which is amazing. Are there any changes that you have seen or that you have heard of that you think should remain a part of what craft beer is here in Florida and in the United States?
So, I mean, I think what it really showed us during quarantine is that craft beer people and the people who visit do have such a loyalty to, it's not just the beer that they're drinking, it's to the people that are behind the bar, to the people that are in the hospitality industry. And we heard that over and over again. And the amount of tipping that was received from buying crowlers was extraordinary from our customers and from our fans. And honestly, I do think that's going to continue, as I think people are willing to give because they know how many people have been struggling through this part. So even though there's been a lot of negative in our world, I think there's so much good that I've seen in people just wanting to give back more to those who can give, wanting to give back more. And I think that will continue.
Excellent. I appreciate it. That's a great sentiment to hear. And especially nowadays, it's wonderful to hear that. I kind of like your sign in the background. It's
a good day.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Sunshine State Happy Hour should be back tomorrow. I have almost completely confirmed with the guests that we have. It's going to be kind of interesting. He is out of San Diego, and it'll be a fun, complete 180 from Polar and Malta and some of those beers. But definitely come check us. If you look on our social media, at Lager Layover and at Florida Beer Blog, you should be able to see once I get it confirmed, and we are good to go. Stacey Oakley from the Florida Brewery in Auburndale. If you have the chance, definitely go. It sounds like an absolutely amazing time, and I will definitely be there as soon as I can to get some of those Beach Me Up, because that sounds
pretty delicious.
Phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. Especially when that pina colada one drops. So
perfect.
We will should be able to see everybody tomorrow at 6 p.m. Stacey, thank you so much for coming on, and have a great rest of your evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.